Chapter 12. Jack lifted his hood as they left the cafe. He flitted between the shadows of the shops and buildings. Beth strode along beside him. They made their way to the corner of the market square. That's when he saw her. The same stooped figure with a wisp of gray hair that he'd seen at the station. She disappeared round the side of a shop. The woman looked so much like Mrs. Roberts it could have been her double. But if it really was her, what was she doing there? "What's up?" said Beth. "I thought I saw someone I know." "Come on," she said, glancing down the street. "I want to get to the library." Jack hesitated. "You go ahead. The library's on the street to the right. I'll meet you there." "What are you going to do?" Beth turned to stare at him and raised her eyebrows. "I've got to check something." He sprinted off down the street before Beth could complain. This was something he needed to do by himself. He didn't want to scare Mrs. Roberts, just find out why she was there. He hurried to the corner and peered round in time to see the hunched figure shuffle into a narrow, fenced alleyway. He dithered for a moment at the entrance and looked up at the sky. Clouds littered the expanse of blue, blocking the sun from sight for now. But it wouldn't last long. Whatever he decided to do, he'd have to be quick. His skin would cook if he stayed outside. He didn't like the idea of becoming a sinister stalker. Say it wasn't her. He'd be telling an innocent old lady round the town. On the other hand, Ted from the cafe had spooked him with all of his talk of spies. What if she was spying on him? Decision made. Luckily, overgrown trees in the bordering gardens provided patches of deep shade on the narrow path. A slight breeze rustled and scratched the leaves against the fencing, and shadows cast gloomy shapes on the panels and the ground in front of him. About 30 meters away, Jack could see Mrs. Roberts. She scurried along, taking small, quick steps. He picked up his pace. He didn't want to lose sight of her, but he also didn't want her to turn around and spot him. Not until he knew where she was going. The path veered a little to the right, running behind a terrace of Victorian houses. He recognized the distinctive roof tiles and the chimney pots peeping between the trees. The old lady stopped. Jack ducked under some branches, flattening himself against the fence. He hoped the leaves would hide him. Peeping through the twigs, he was in time to observe her open a slatted gate and disappear through it. As soon as she'd gone, he sped after her. Finally, he reached the spot where she'd disappeared. There were two gates immediately in front of him, and another little further along. Which one? He said to himself. In the end, he plumped for the middle gate, which he was pretty sure she had used. He twisted the ring handle and pushed. Locked. He glanced up and down the path. No one in sight. Then he examined the gate, flexing his fingers. He could imagine Beth rolling her eyes at him, saying, "It's not a roof, Jack." Being able to jump and climb had its uses on the ground, too, though. He stretched up, grasped the rough wood at the top. He lifted his left foot onto one of the struts and pushed upwards so that he ended up straddling the gate. Below him was an overgrown garden, with knee-high weeds and unkempt bushes scattered amongst tall grass. An old magnolia tree obscured his view of most of the house. Gnarled, low-hanging branches almost met the ground, and a goblet-shaped pink flowers clung between the leaves. Carefully, he lowered his body down, hoping no one had spotted him. He crept toward the house, skirting around the edge of the garden where the foliage was thickest. Squatting underneath one of the windows, he raised his head so he could see over the sill. The room was empty. He huffed in frustration. She might have gone into the front room. There was no hope of getting around there. He'd already noted that there was no side gate. Maybe she's gone upstairs, he thought to himself. He glanced at his watch. He needed to act fast, and itchiness was beginning to spread across his cheeks, a sign his skin was reacting to the sun's rays. On impulse, Jack grabbed a low limb of the nearby magnolia and swung himself onto it. The numerous thick branches provided a choice of footholds. He scrambled up until he was level with the upstairs window. Scooting on his backside along a large branch, one leg either side, he edged toward the glass pane. He peeped in. There was a bed in the room pushed against the left wall, and on the right was a dressing table. A pair of pink slippers lay by the chest of drawers. Leaves from the branches crackled and grated against the glass. The noise seemed magnified to his ears. His heart beating rapidly, he scooted backwards. Grabbing the nearest branch, he started to lower himself to the ground. As he reached one of the last boughs, there was a loud crack. He yelled in alarm as he crashed through the leaves, hitting the grass with a thud. He lay there winded, ribs aching as if he'd been punched. He lurched to his feet and climbed back through the garden. Every bone in his back throbbed. As he heaved himself over the gate, he looked back. A figure stood at the window staring out at the garden. An old lady with gray hair and a hunch. It had to be Mrs. Roberts. Who else could it be? Jack dropped into the alley and kicked the fence in frustration. His skin felt fiery hot. He had been out in the sun long enough. Confronting Mrs. Roberts would have to wait to another day. He hobbled to the library and found Beth waiting for him outside. "What's wrong?" she asked. "I thought—" "What?" Beth scrunched her black eyebrows together into a puzzled frown. "They've got spies everywhere." Ted's words hung in his mind. Beth would think he'd gone mad. He shrugged. Oh, nothing. I'm imagining things.